sitting in for Chairman Rob Orris. Tonight is a joint meeting of the Town Council and Budget Committee for the purposes of, by way of video teleconference, for purposes of discussing some operating budget items, library and other matters, which will follow. So, Ms. Talbot, will you call the roll?
Certainly. Mr. Borrowy?
Present.
Mr. Jinks?
Here.
Ms. Nichols?
Here.
Mr. Orris? Expect him later. Mr. Slocum?
Here.
Kiara Slocum? Mr. Talbot?
Here.
Mr. Veliver? Mr. Walsh?
Here.
We have a quorum of the full council and a quorum of the Budget Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Talbot. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you all. Tonight, I'm going to make a minor adjustment to the agenda and move item 5 to replace item 3, which will follow, and it is the acceptance and appropriation of donations to the Human Services COVID-19 Assistance Program. And just for the purposes, before I ask for a motion, I just want to let everybody to know that after tonight's acceptance, we will have received to date $13,525 to this account, which is truly extraordinary. And I would encourage as many people as feel comfortable and feel they can appropriate any amount of money or donate any amount of money. It'll be used for whatever purpose they so desire. And I think it's just terrific. So with that, I'm going to invite Mr. Bowery to make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair or Mr. Vice Chairman. It is indeed a pleasure to accept gifts like this and of this generosity in our community. Just a representative sample of the great things we expect and do get from Cheshire residents. Be it resolved that the Cheshire Town Council approves Resolution 050620-1. Be it resolved that the Town Council accepts and approves the following donations totaling $4,700 to the Human Services gift account for the COVID-19 Assistance Program. Ron and Sharon Bergamo, $2,500. Patricia Kachis, $200. Christopher and Noel Fletcher, $100. Denise White Patterson and Johnny Patterson, $50. Donald Byrne, $50. Bruce Jacoby, $100. William and Deborah Sherman, $100. George and Susan Temmie, $200. Susan and Joel Chasen, $200. Robert and Nancy Knapp, $1,000. And James and Marie Jinks, $200.
We have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Thank you, Mrs. Nichols. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
I've never seen the council turn down money, and we are grateful for those donations. Exceptionally grateful. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Bowery, I'm going to turn the agenda over to you.
Okay, thank you. And
Thank you,
we'll move
sir.
into the budget workshop portion of the meeting. And we will continue. This is actually the last night that we have scheduled for department reviews. And we will have a meeting next Tuesday because the council meeting is not expected to run particularly long, where we will use a catch-up meeting of outstanding items, and probably we will cancel next Thursday's meeting and possibly have one next Wednesday. So be Tuesday and Wednesday, where we could actually look at a summary sheet that will be prepared of what the expectation might be of savings from this year that can then roll into surplus that would be usable for next year to help with the mill rate, and also some of the adjustments that are kind of given and by consensus for next year's recommended budget. And then we'll move into the horse trading, if you will, and the give and take, and take the temperature of all 8 of us that are on the council at the moment, and see where we stand with exact amounts to departments and specific expenditure items and income items. So the agenda is the library, arts place. I don't think we have any outstanding issues for public works. We do have water pollution control, outstanding issues from last night that we will get to on Tuesday. We just, in the intervening day, didn't really have enough time to clear up some of the issues with that. So tonight we'll really have library, arts place, and any others that we may want to be brought up. So I'll hand it over to town manager and ask him if he'd like to do a little preamble before we call on our librarian. Library director.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I'll be very brief, and we do have just one or two, I think, other updates. I'm going to wait till our finance director can get on. He has a couple of the debt service schedules that we talked about a little bit yesterday that we may go through. We could also just email those out and maybe touch on them on Tuesday too, but I know he's wrapping up with retirement, the retirement board meeting going on right now. So in lieu of that, I think maybe we should just dive right into the library first and then follow that up with Arts Place. So I will turn it over to Library Director Beth Crowley, and I believe, Beth, you'll be controlling your own screen once you're ready to start. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, let me get that up for you. This is also new for me. Till 6 weeks ago, Zoom was a TV show I watched as a kid growing up. So, whoops, I have host disabled participant screen sharing.
Sorry, here we go. 1 second. Oh, hold on.
Let me tell you why you're queuing that up. I think you guys have done an excellent job, the departments, of putting together presentations. I really, to your credit, really, I know this is tough, and I think it's been very good for the council. That's just my little blurb for you. And now you can start whenever you're ready, of course.
Okay, I think I did it. I think I just enabled the screen sharing. So try one more time.
Let's try that again. Thank you. There we go.
All right, there's sometimes a little bit of a lag. There we go.
Yep,
okay,
there you go, Beth.
Very good.
All right. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chair Bowery and Mr. Slocum filling in for our board chair. I really appreciate the flexibility today. I was able to get here, which I'm happy about. So, but thank you for giving me that out just in case I couldn't make it. But I know some of you are new and others I have spoken to before. So I did give a little bit of a background in the beginning of my presentation for those of you who are not as familiar maybe with our operation. So we'll start with that. So this is our mission statement, that the Cheshire Public Library transforms lives and strengthens the community. And we do that by being open 62 hours plus per week. This does include evenings and Saturdays and Sundays, a little bit less in the summer, a little bit more from November to March when we're open on Sundays. We run every day 4 staff service desks, including reception, circulation where you borrow the materials, reference services, and children's services. And those generally have 3 4-hour shifts, or on our shorter days, 2 4-hour shifts that are always people at those desks while we are open for public hours. Our hours of operation that you see on our doors, those are full public hours. So we don't have downtime normally. And we also provide free library materials and programs for all ages. We offer a collection of 108,636 print and audio visual materials and 60 digital collections, which are being heavily used now, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and 13 programs per week. These are 2 new residents that just moved to town this year, and one of the first things they did was come and get their library card, and we do see that often. One of the things people look at when they look to move to a town, along with the schools and the other services, is what is the library like? Is it something that we're going to want to use and be robust? So how did we do in fiscal year 18-19? That's the full year of stats that we have. So that's why I give you these statistics. So you can see that, we're doing really well. Our library visits were up quite a bit. We have 11,612 residents. About 40% of our residents have a library card. Our materials were borrowed 359,027 times. You can see we get quite a bit of action at our reference desk and also on our Wi-Fi and our public computers. They're heavily used. And our programs also are very well attended. This is one of our most popular programs, our Sunday concerts that we run once or twice a month from November to March. My deputy director, Deb Rutter, does a great job putting these together. She gets really quality people, and we get crowds of over 100 to 150. We open up the wall. The whole library kind of becomes a concert on Sundays if you've ever been there. But the numbers for our use out of context don't tell you a lot. So you can benchmark what we do against what the state library collects for towns of a similar size. So you can see for us, we are above the average for towns who are similar. One of the most important things, and I did mention this last year, but this is still holding true, is that only 3% of our residents go out of town to borrow library materials versus 10% of residents in towns similar to Cheshire. So you can use your library card in any town in Connecticut. So you have that choice. You can just go in, they'll register you. If you're in our consortium, you just go right ahead. So people have a choice in Connecticut. When they choose to stay in town because they're able to find the materials that they're looking for in Cheshire, they also continue to do all of their other things that they want to do in town, like grocery shop or stop over at Cheshire Pizza and get lunch after coming to a library program. This keeps the money in town. When residents go out of town, they will use their grocery stores and their gas stations and their coffee shops. So I think it's really important that we are providing a collection that is meeting the needs of our residents, and we are unique in that compared to towns similar to us. So what did we do this year? 2019 highlights, and these are all in the vertical budget book, but I just pulled out a few to go over tonight. We had a 106% increase in participation for kids in grades K through 6 in our summer reading. And that's because we totally revamped the program. We made it an interactive program that you had to come into the library to do, and people really liked it. We had a total participation of 457, which included, I think, about 50 adults. We added an adult component. So we had a lot of participation, and that was great. We provide safe after-school events for young adults on DOD half days. I think there's about 4 or 5 of those that happen a year, and we get an onslaught of the kids coming in. So we've really made an effort to make that a special day and not just have them hanging out. We provide some programming, we provide them space to hang out and do homework, and that's been a great place for kids to come after school. And then their parents come and pick them up. So it's a really, a nice service for parents as well. Between July and when we closed down this year to the public, we did 541 visits and deliveries to homebound patrons. And if you can see the quote, that's something that people really appreciate. We do about 16 deliveries to homebound patrons a week. And we're continuing to check in with them during this time. The person, Noreen, who does that on my staff, is calling those people while they're at home and checking in and making sure they're okay. We also supported the creation of a new community group called On With Life, or OWL, and it's aimed at residents 60 plus who have lost a spouse to death or divorce. And we felt this was a really important group. It was started by Chris Archambault, who's a resident, and it's because people are coming to the library to make connections. They want to use it as a place for socialization. So this is actually a picture of our Books Over Coffee, which we do at noon once a month. We have a lot of people in our town who are looking for daytime, weekday programming. So we've been trying to meet that need, and we've offered more things for people during the day. We also hosted, I think, about 4 job recruitment tables for the 2020 census, and I know they had a good turnout at that. We installed a very popular public ADA accessible scanner, which converts documents and photos to digital files. So when we reopen again, if you haven't had a chance to use that and you've got some photos sitting around, come try that. Again, between July and March, we taught 31 technology classes, and some of that includes outreach to the Senior Center and Beachport. And you can also see by our quote, one of our attendees said that he not only managed to learn some things, he remembered them too. So he really appreciated that. And then something I was really proud of is we created a 3D virtual tour of historical sites in town to be part of our interactive activity at the Cheshire's 325th celebration booth at the Fall Festival. So this was one of those times when I went to my staff, we brought in some VR technology, we're just starting to get used to it, and we had this challenge of what could we do interactive that had to do with the 325th celebration at the Fall Festival. And I said, is there any way we could make like a virtual tour? And I had no idea if you could do this. And they jumped right on it and they did it. And you can see we have a very happy participant trying the VR headset. And I just found out about an hour ago that we actually have won an honorable mention in the Connecticut Library Association electronic media category for their publicity awards. And they'll be giving those tomorrow on a Zoom meeting. So we were having a great time in 2009. And then everything kind of changed. And so did we. So we had to step out of our boxes and into our residents' homes. This is actually a picture of a patron's son that is participating in one of our storytime programs. And if you can kind of see the laptop that they're looking at, you can see one of our librarians, and the child's mimicking the actions that they're seeing. We're getting about 60 families logging in 3 times a week to our virtual story time. So we're still able to do that. I was so impressed with how my staff picked up the ball when we had to close to the public and came up with these virtual programs. I'm sure if you've seen during these meetings, this is technology that we weren't all really ready to jump on and be on TV and try to do this. And they were ready to do it the second week. I almost said, no, let's give it a little more time, but they were ready to go. And I said, yes. And I was so impressed. They've really learned a lot of new skills in a very short amount of time. And they've been able to provide a really robust amount of library service virtually. And I'll get into those statistics in a little bit. I said at our meeting last fall when I met with the personnel committee that there's a famous quote I love by Timothy Healy, who said, the most important asset of the library goes home at night. Well, I want to just revise that to say that, well, that asset is at home. They are proving themselves over and over to be such an important asset to what we do. They've offered 36 virtual programs, which have been viewed by 1,069 participants, and that's for all ages. We've added a great suite of adult programs now. We're doing a really popular meditation program. I'm going to be hosting a view from the hiring desk to give job tips and interview tips to folks who might be looking for jobs now. We also created some instructional and informational videos for YouTube. We've added certainly more to our digital content. And we have 55 new library card registrations where people logged on online and got their library card since March 13th, which is a lot of online self-registration cards. We usually don't see that, but they are now signing up, so that's great. And we've also been helping out the senior center with 3 of our staff making wellness calls to seniors. Each of those 3 staff are making about 500 calls from a list of about 1,500. And people have really been appreciative of that help. So our digital downloads have increased 111% over the same time last year. Ancestry.com allowed libraries to provide remote access. You used to have to come into the library to use it. So you can see that the searches have significantly increased over what they usually are. Our new BBC content was viewed 622 times, and our website traffic and our online newsletter use has increased. That's how people are communicating with us and finding out what we're doing in the library. So our digital engagement has definitely gone up. So I know that Mr. Talbot had this question for other departments. What are you going to do going forward that you've started doing during COVID-19? So I put together this slide. We're going to continue to offer some live virtual programming to meet needs. We do get requests sometimes from patrons who can't come to the library in person. So while we certainly really like the in-person programming, I think that works very well. If we have an opportunity to continue to use virtual programming to meet the needs of people who can't come to the library, we can continue to do that. Definitely the informational instructional videos. I think those are great, especially for how to use certain technology tools that we have or databases. We will maintain the streaming services and simultaneous use digital materials that we have added. I don't want to take those away just because we come back into the building. But one of the most important things that the library will do is help our residents get back on their feet. In times of economic downturn, historically, libraries' use goes up. We will be there to help them with job search. We have a Job Now database that they can use, and we can also provide some programming. Free computer and internet access in case people don't have that, or maybe have had to cut back on that if their income has gone down. Certainly in the same vein, borrowing materials instead of buying them, and then attending free programs. Those concerts are of a quality that most people would pay for, and so they could come and have a same quality program without having to pay for it. Or our early literacy classes, same thing, if you can't do paid for classes at that point. And another way I would really like to help our residents, and this is actually something I was going to propose to the council before COVID ever happened. It is in my goals and objectives in the vertical book, and is for the library to go fine free. We are currently not charging fines on materials that are checked out because people can't return them. But more importantly, the American Library Association has encouraged and actually passed a resolution for libraries to discontinue the practice of charging fines. Many large systems such as San Francisco, Chicago, Los Angeles have already done so because they feel it's a social, it creates a social inequity and a barrier to access. Several libraries in the LCI consortium that we belong to have already gone fine-free, and others are considering doing so. So in December of last year, I asked my library board to approve a motion to allow me to investigate with the town manager and then ask the town council for approval for a final plan that would allow the library to go fine-free. The research has shown that there's no significant difference in on-time returns when we eliminate fines, but library use does increase. So I looked at how many of our library users were blocked because they owed fines. So back in November, 7% of our users were blocked because they owed $10 or more. And they had not been back to the library in 6 months. A lot of people feel really bad about owing fines. They think it's going to be this huge amount of money, and they don't come back. And they often keep the materials too. So we lose materials and we lose patrons, which is not the goal of having fines. The revenue from our fines represents only about 0.6% of our total library budget. We would still charge fees for lost or damaged items, things that actually wouldn't come back to the library because they couldn't find them or they were damaged. So we would still get money back for that. But ultimately, eliminating fines will ensure that Cheshire residents will have the access to library services as they recover from the economic effects of COVID-19. Now, this is not a decision I'm asking you to necessarily make in the budget process. We can have a longer conversation at another time, and I can do a longer presentation with more data and things to talk about later. But this is something that I would like to consider as we go forward into the next fiscal year. And just in case there are new members on the board, the council does set the fine rate for the library, so it would be up to you. So the COVID impact on our current year budget, we reallocated money that we were going to use for print materials to buy more digital materials. We purchased 4 Zoom Pro accounts so that we could do virtual programming and maintain all of the quality and control over those. We have purchased, and we anticipate having to purchase items related to social distancing, safety of staff, physical barriers as we come back in. I'm working on plans for what that reopening would look like. And we're projecting approximately $5,700 in savings from my non-salary lines and $33,853 from my salary lines, which is 6 library employees who we furloughed. And then our loss in revenue is about $4,800. Our revenue sources are not a lot. We have fines, we have lost and paid, we have room use rentals, copiers, making copies, and also faxing. That's where our revenue comes from. So my budget is pretty straightforward. My non-salary lines, I had a 2.25% decrease. That was achieved through keeping most lines flat, or I decreased them. I look back at the last 3 or 4 years of actuals and really try to make sure that that's in line with what we really need. But the other way we reduced it is we actually moved the church parking lot rental fee to the public property budget, and that represented, taking out about $3,500, I think. And then I reduced, the library board has a budget, but they hadn't really been using a part of it for things like going to conferences. So I did reduce that by 13.8%. And then salaries is the standard 2.45% increase, with the extra over the 2% being minimum wage increase requirements. And that is my presentation. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. I've always felt that our library is a treasure that really does reach out to so many people, and you're proving that even now with the inability to move around, but the ability to get around still and get in touch with people, and that's important. And I'm glad to hear that you're helping make the calls with the Human Services Department. That's a good job sharing and a good important use of time and effort, especially at a local level of our government. I do have a question, not to have to get practical here for a moment, but we are talking about taxpayers' dollars and how we can best use them and see if there's any potential savings. I do have a question about the replacement of books, and I know a lot of it is probably to keep current and make sure that we have current titles and stuff. But how much of it might we be able to save, or the fact that the library hasn't had the materials out as much? And therefore, maybe we can save a little bit next year as a one-time savings from items that maybe weren't used or taken out for a quarter of this year and therefore didn't get wear and tear.
Right. So that's a good question. I think that we can definitely look at, the length of a library material. We'd be able to keep things that hadn't been used. So things that we were buying now, or things that came in early in the year that really didn't get a chance to go out, certainly would last a little bit longer. We take our materials budget. We do also use the money that the lost and paid items, lost and damaged items, and we do use that to buy replacements. So we do have some revenue that comes in that helps with those. So, the materials line, while I hate to reduce it, we did reduce it last year by about $15,000. It is the line that we can control the spending on. But so when we do have to make cuts, that is one place that I do look to make cuts. We are in the LCI consortium, so our town doesn't just have access to our materials, but they have access to materials in 29 other libraries. So there are ways that we can make up some of that. I should also mention that another revenue stream that we have that I forgot to say that you approved, I think at one of your last council meetings, is our Kinetic card reimbursement. And that is the money that we get because people from other towns come and borrow our materials. And last year that was a $20,000 reimbursement. So we do have some money in there that we can use for other things that we didn't put in the budget, which is why I don't come back to the council for special appropriations when we want to buy a new VR headset, or things that we hadn't really planned on or put in to, like a capital occurring line or something. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it gave me an idea that there might be some wiggle room in there because you may not be replacing as much, and the wiggle room, you certainly can't say, well, gee, I think we'll take 25% less. That wouldn't be a good library director to push that if you had to cut yourself off that way. But it sort of gives me a sense, so I appreciate that. I do want to ask if you've had a chance to talk to some of your colleagues around the state at other libraries, or your team here in town, and if you're expecting maybe less hands-on use, maybe actual books, handheld reading may not be used as much, and therefore maybe there won't be as much need for that kind of staff to be able to put them back at pages and things like that, to put them back. So I'm wondering if maybe you've thought about, do you need to redirect some of the staff more towards online, or do you think maybe there might be a savings of staff if the library usage is down a bit, even when we do get back to the new normal?
Yeah, I think that people are really chomping at the bit to get back and get materials from the library. Our heaviest use is in our print and our physical items. So I don't think that's going to go down. I think if anything, if we see any reduction, it'll be because maybe people are nervous about coming into a public space. We get about 600 visits a day. So people may be a little nervous about coming to such a highly trafficked area, but I don't think we're going to see a reduction in the use of our physical materials. In fact, we may see an increase, particularly as if people are no longer able to buy them and have them in their homes. We may see new users who come in. I hope that our users who have now discovered our digital content will continue to use that as well. And that will, certainly help. But digital content is actually more expensive to purchase than physical content because of the publisher's rights and things like that. So that's sometimes a double-edged sword with having to add to that. Certainly, I understand that we are in a tough financial situation, and depending on what I would be asked to look at as a cut to the library, it may, if it was big enough, it may have to be staff. And in my situation with the library union, the non-union staff, which would be the people you were referencing, the who shelve the books, the pages, and a couple of the other classifications, technically they're first to be laid off if that was to happen. But doing that, well, the shelving may seem like one of the lower level tasks. It's actually one of the most important that we have. And they're actually in the stacks. They're almost our main frontline people because they will interact with a patron in the stacks who then they can redirect to a librarian if necessary. So they really do help us out with meeting patrons' needs where they are in the library itself, but also being able to get materials turned around quickly and put back on the shelves really helps with access. So, it would be tough to lose any of the help that we have based on the high use that we have in the library, but certainly, that might be something we have to look at if that's where we're at.
All right. I certainly do respect the pages. Many, many moons ago when I was a kid growing up in town, I was one of the few male pages that they had. Their volunteering time, putting books away, and actually it was the magazines was my part, checking them in and putting them out. So I do know how important that is, how well used the library is. So I do greatly appreciate that. And I think I've talked long enough. I'm going to see if there's a
Mr. Bowery. Yeah,
Yes.
I had a question and also an observation. Beth, thank you for your presentation. I'm pleased to see you've been able to adapt and have your adaptation accepted widely in the community. I think that's terrific. The other observation I do have with the library is that it's probably one of the things we offer in town that serves the broadest population sector. In a sense, you got old and young and people in between. And I think that's what makes the library relatively, important as we consider the budget. But the other thing, there's two things I wanted to ask about. Number one, I can't find the revenue generated from fines, and I was turned off by the fact that San Francisco's leading the charge, and I'll leave it at that. And then the other aspect is, I've observed that a lot of your material growth and some of your statistical information is an outcrop of how the libraries become sort of a social situation for so many people. And I wondered how you respond to that. I mean, it's like it's a recreation sort of educational center. And I don't know if that is the worst thing. It certainly probably is a good thing in terms of visitors to the library, but it does seem as though you've expanded in that way over the years greatly. And is that the way people come to the library? That increases your numbers in the library? Just exactly how important is that in your interpretation of the library's growth and sustenance in the community? It's not a budget question, but it is part of how we decide on what goes on in the library and whether we cut hours on Saturday or Sunday or whatever, when we're making budget choices.
Yeah, actually, but they're both excellent questions. So as far as the fine revenue, it's a little under $12,000 a year.
Okay.
That we make.
Okay.
That we've been over the last few
And
years.
if I could just jump in real quick on the fine revenue, Tim, and just for anyone kind of following along, page 109 of the vertical book does show the revenues by department, and you will see that I did incorporate to be conservative. I did incorporate the fine-free revenue adjustment to the budget, so that is in the current manager recommended budget. You'll see that the public library revenue expectations are down $11,000. That's the estimated number from fine-free.
Okay.
To the question about the library as a social center, this is definitely a trend of growth that we've seen nationally in library use. So even going back, 10 years or so, this is the one area of growth that all libraries have seen continue to rise. I think what has happened is as we've become more and more disconnected, basically because we're using technology, people are really craving that interaction, that social interaction. I do think that one of the reasons we're getting a lot of participation in our Zoom programming is because people can actually see each other. And a lot of what those programs are turning into is people chatting with each other and talking to each other. There's a lot of social isolation that happens as people, particularly at the age, but even people who are just single and living alone, they want to come out and they want to meet the people in their community. That used to be, and it's called in the literature, the third place. It used to be like the coffee shop or the barber shop where people would hang out and talk. So what we are offering are informational, educational, cultural offerings that people can come to, and they don't have any added cost beyond what they've already paid in their taxes. And they can interact with people of like interests, of, you know, and learn something and enjoy their time together. We're having a lot of excitement and interest in our adult craft programs or our trivia nights. So, you know, these are really ways that people can come out in the community, come to something that they don't have to pay any more money for, and they could, you know, have a good evening with their friends. We also have just the idea of just people coming in who need a place to go during the day and have some social interaction. And it's really nice to see those relationships forming. I've seen them form between older people and younger people when they're working on the puzzle table together. I've seen them in the teen room, you know, with people making friends. And, you know, in all of our interactions, I think that this really is something that the residents of most towns want, the ability to come to a place where it's a neutral place. They don't have to buy anything. They don't have to get kicked out if they don't buy anything, and they can stay and they can be welcome. So yes, I do think that that is a high use of the library, and probably one of the most popular reasons that people come in.
Right. Are there other, Councilman Walsh? I see your hand.
Thank you, Beth. Thanks for that. Makes me want to go renew my library card.
You can do it online really easy right now.
I won't do it right now. Maybe after the meeting.
Yeah, don't hold us up.
All right.
Don't worry, Don. Nobody wants to chat with you all night.
The feeling's mutual. The salaries, it looks like it's a netting out of around a $23,000 increase. Is that over like change positions? Is that what happened there? Or?
I believe that's just the contractual increases.
Okay.
And then there were some increases put in because of minimum wage requirements going up.
Okay. And going back to the I guess the late fees, when you know these other cities or state towns that are getting rid of the fees, do they find that they end up getting more stuff back from the people, or rather than if they just kept the fines adding up, they never get it back at all? Is that kind of like, okay, so.
Yeah, that's definitely what happens. And I've had that, that's been my experience through my 20 years of working in libraries. I've lost some precious materials because people were afraid to bring them back and pay or couldn't pay the fee and couldn't bring them back. So yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Mrs. Nichols, I saw your hand.
Okay, a couple of observations simply. I think the library is a wonderful place. Tim, I hear where you're going. I'm not sure we need to provide that, but for those of us who have lived in Cheshire for a long, long, long time, we did have those social places to interact, and that was at the Cheshire Dump, right? Remember? Or at times when it was the old building and there were barrels of nails and things that we could stand around and talk at. And it made me chuckle to think that we have changed our habits a little bit and we're ending up at the library, which is, I think, a benefit to the town. I think that the library is doing a spectacular job, and we put proportionately a lot of money into activities for younger people. I don't see that. I do agree we have to pay attention to the budget. I do think we need to be very careful about the increases in salaries and cost of materials and all those things that you've all talked about. But I think it's a service that for the impact to the taxpayer is greater than to nickel dime it too much, so that we're not providing a reasonably expected service for the taxpayer. I think they appreciate those small things, and some of the people complain, at least from my population group, says we disproportionately spend a lot of money on things that they can't participate in, and this is something that they can. So speaking for that age of population.
Well, to Sylvia's point, if I may, if you're done, Sylvia,
Yeah.
I actually agree with your with what you've said, and I don't want to have been misinterpreted. I guess I'm recognizing that it's become a broader reach to the community, and it does have its benefits, and it seems to be one way to sustain the model. I guess that was my point. Not that we're spending too much. I can't even determine in the budget book what we're spending to get all that done. I guess it's all in salaries. There's not a line. There's a couple of program lines, but it doesn't seem like it's a whole lot of juice. It's mostly just salary with everything else that goes on at the library. Correct?
Yeah, I would say, Mr. Sullivan, to that point, the programming money actually comes from the Friends of the Cheshire Library. You don't see that in our budget. And I know we've
Right.
talked about that in the past.
Right.
So they give us quite a bit every year to sustain the programming that we're offering.
Right.
So, that
Right.
is coming in separately. And I would also just make the point that for every tax dollar that our residents are paying, we're giving back $5 in services and materials. So, it really is a good turn on investment for the residents, and it is open to any resident,
Right.
to use. So nobody's left out.
Good. I'm glad I could get my question and point clarified. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions or I see Mayor Orris, welcome.
Yes, thank you. My apologies for being a bit late. I had another commitment. I also want to commend the library for what they're doing. And I think the library has morphed into providing much more services than I ever knew as a kid that our library delivered back home. And I think that's a good thing. And I've kind of questioned over the last couple of years why we needed to do that. But I think you did a great job of summarizing tonight why the community benefits from these additional services. And one of the things that I really appreciate you spending some time on was the opportunity for so many in our community to be able to go somewhere and interact with people and not be looked to buy something or that really struck home with me, that they have a safe place to go to meet good people and to interact with people. And it becomes a really great place so that we get people out of isolation. And I really wasn't thinking of it in that way. So I appreciate you mentioning that. I think it went a long way for me to further understand the benefits of what you do. The problem we're dealing with this year is unfortunately a pandemic the likes we haven't seen in 100 years. And our businesses and taxpayers are being hammered like they haven't seen in 100 years. And so the reality is this department, like so many others, are very labor intensive. And the only way I see us being able to provide a reasonable budget to the taxpayers and the businesses to pay taxes here, meaning a zero mill rate increase, is to really focus on the labor component. And so we talked a lot about that in this budget process. And I'm really hopeful that we're going to get that collaboration going forward from the labor from all groups in order to accomplish what we want, because none of us here want to cut services. We have become accustomed to the services that you all provide, whether it be the library, the senior center, our school system. All of you play such a major, important part of the value of this community, and it all plays into the values of our homes. People move here partly because of the schools, the library, the senior center, the athletics, all of the different components together make up a great community. So we're not looking to gut services, but we're stuck in a very difficult decision this year. And I'm really hopeful that labor will recognize that, work with us to move forward with some kind of a collaborative budget that minimizes labor contracts in the next 12 to 24 months so that we can continue to maintain the services that we want to deliver the community and the community expects. So thank you for all you do. It is critically important, and the last thing we want to do is be cutting services. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any other hands up. I'm flipping through the screens here, sensing then you're ready to move on. All right, Beth, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I see Joanne Pilarczyk is there, ready to move on to fine arts for us. Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. I will need help with my
Yep, I'm going to pull it up right now.
Thank
Joanne,
you.
just give me 1 second. Yep, I just got to click out of my. There we go. Okay.
And do you mind controlling it for me, Sean, and I can just say next?
Sure. Yep. Just
Okay.
say next slide, and I'll click right on through. So give me 1
Thank you.
second, and here we go. All right, and now I'm back.
it is, Sean.
Thank you. There we go. Okay, should be up on the screen now. And yeah, Joanne, why don't you just take it away?
Okay. Well, this is my first PowerPoint and I'm learning so much being at home. But I want to just say it's great to be associated with the library and associated with all of you. I understand what a difficult year this is going to be. As you know, our mission is to promote the arts. Next slide, please. So look where we started back in 1991 with that 67 students. And now we have about 350 students per week coming through our sessions, which run almost year round. We shut down for a couple weeks in August to prepare. Art is fun. This is, I think this is a homeschool class making masks. Next slide, please. You might recognize Fran Pate. She's our oldest student at 101. And our students are happy at every age. We have rave reviews, and it's not due to me. It's due to my excellent staff and the 24 plus talented, wonderful teachers that we have. We form a community. Next slide. Thanks to Arnett, we're in our current home since 2001. I did ask some students what arts.
Is it coming through? There's definitely a lag when I click the next one. It takes about
Okay.
10 seconds, but is it coming through? There we go.
And you'll notice the last sentence is, I would love to take an online class with Rita Parody and June Webster, because of course we have to go forward with new ideas and put the teachers back to work. Next, please. Our specialty workshops are popular, particularly teachers. Little did I know the first time I signed up for art classes, how many years ago, how important it would become in my life. It is like my second home. Friendships are a big part of taking art classes at Arts Place. Next. We couldn't do this without our Friends organization either. They provide programming and sponsor Art Heals. Art Heals has changed the lives of many Cheshire residents. A teacher visits a homebound client's home for 4 to 6 lessons, and then the artwork is framed for free. And it's just made a huge difference in people that are homebound permanently or temporarily. Well, now we're all homebound, and now we need to reach out to more people. Also, Friends just reprinted the book that we had written, the activity book that's part of the 3rd grade curriculum. And they sponsor many free ballet, theater workshops. They pay for these with their annual author event held each year. This will be, I think, the 17th year if we are able to go forward with that in October. Next. I like this. For 35 years, I worked 14-hour days as a pharmacist, leaving me little time for exploring art. Arts Place has brought great joy to my retirement. There are many different kinds of classes. I'm able to meet new people. I experience great joy when I go to Arts Place. It's such an important part of our community. Next. So whether you're using paper mache to make masks or dragons, and you'll see a note from Liz Shapiro underneath the Director of Connecticut Office of the Arts. I've been in contact with them, and just today they released their protocol for reopening. Connecticut's creative sector makes up $9 billion plus of our state's GDP, and COVID has just affected about 60,000 artists and performers in the state. Next. Here's some tissue paper collages or recycled, and it's true no matter what your age you are, when it's a day for an art class, you wake up eager to start your day. Next. We partner with everybody in our community. You'll see the slide on the left is from Arts Day last year. So we didn't get to have our 32nd annual Arts Day this year. And that truly has given thousands of people a chance to make art. We raise money at the door to collect donations for our scholarship. This year, we are giving $2,500 to 3 high school students towards their college. We sponsor the art market, become very popular. We hold art exhibits for our students and staff. Last year, we collaborated with the Ball and Socket Arts and with the Historical Society on projects. Next. So we lost our last Monday classes in the final week. That took a while to give refunds or credits. Then we had to halt our enrollment of 150 registrants and refund. I'm sure we're most likely going to cancel the 6 weeks of our summer session. So, you know, I normally bring in 125,000, and right now we have 85,000. Next. So, being creative as every other arts organization, we're going to go forward and develop virtual art workshops. These online workshops will begin with a trial of 5 different classes by 5 teachers for different ages and fun subjects. They're going to be filmed and edited by a professional that has 20 years of experience in video and TV production. The workshops will be sent in 2 or 3 installments to students. Students then as a class will get 2 Zoom calls from the instructor and receive comments on their artwork, and that's crucial for class interaction. Initially, we will package our supplies and label them and leave them outside on the handicap ramp. After 2.5 or 3 times of running with a max of 8 people per class. And what can I take forward from this experience? Well, people do come from different states to take our classes. But now with these classes, they can be offered far beyond Cheshire and the state, all over the country. And in fact, today only, I've had somebody ask about purchasing this class for their grandchild in Florida and somebody wanting one in California. So I can see that we're going to make money from this. This learning curve is going to work. And if I do reopen, I need to reopen only upstairs. We'll have to roll it out in a slow way. But in the meantime, I want to keep making these professional quality art classes so that we can bring in some revenue and satisfy our classes that are students that are eager to begin. Next. I think this is a wonderful comment from Joanne. She said she drives 35 minutes to participate in our classes, but had she known, she would have bought in Cheshire because of Arts Place. And I like this, that she applauds you all for supporting the arts. And I do too. Next. This is so true. Next. You are the only municipality in the state to support the arts in our budget. And we are in awe when I am at meetings with other members, and that means it could be Yale Rep or the Yale Art Museum, all the places. They applaud Cheshire because we support the arts in our budget, and it's not a big budget. This year, I know what a tough part you're in. I had my budget going up by 10%. I'm taking that out. I'm going to cut it by 8,000 so that I'm even going to be 1% less than my last presentation. And of course, I'll be frugal as I always am in going forward. Next. It doesn't matter how slowly you go as long as you don't stop. Thank you. That's the end.
Thank you. Are there questions? I see Mr. Talbot's hand up right away. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Joanne, thank you very much for the presentation and the great quotes too. Very good. So you may be off the hook. Page 160, 5403, the A&E maintenance. The Vermont System Rec Track went up like 59% from $2,000 to a little over $3,000.
Because it became cloud-based. So we could handle those refunds from working from home. And I thought Apex was going to absorb some part of that in their budget, but I haven't heard that, so I've left it in.
So is that going to be an annual then, or was that just added on because of the
Because of the web
refund?
hosting share? I'm not sure. When I tried to look into this earlier, I couldn't find the answer of that. You know, we share this with the pool and park and rec, and that's my portion. But I thought that was a huge jump too. I agree. I need more information
Yeah,
about that.
particularly, I do think this is one that I'll have to double check to confirm, and certainly with John, they're the largest portion of the rec track user system, but I know there was a little bit of moving around of the cost share for that system. But that is a larger percentage increase than we had in the other budget. So it's possible we'll have to double check what we have in the IT budget to make sure it's not being counted twice.
Right.
And then Joanne, on that same page, the rental and lease, did the Academy just start charging us then for the space for Arts Day, or because that jumped from the 100, or actually it was at the actual in 2019 was only $24 and it's now 600. So
Yes, you know, a couple years ago, we had some difficulty because I think some of the people were parking in fire lanes. So what the Academy asked is that we hire 2 of their security staff, and they are charging $450 a year. And so we do not hire the Cheshire Police anymore. It kind of was a wash for our budget. So after we canceled this year, we split that. So I can cut that part back to 325 because they have 225 for our money going towards next year's Arts Day. So you don't have all my revised figures that I'm sorry that you don't, that cut all of those down from the 97,148 to $89,040 minus $8,100.
okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Oh, I see another hand.
Yeah.
Mr. Slocum.
Mr. Slocum, thank you, Mr. Bowery. Joanne or Sean, just looking at the total budget estimate of $222,897. That's the total estimated budget against a reduced revenue of $85,000. Means that your operating budget without some other adjustments was at 138,000 roughly to operate your department.
40,000 less that I'll be taking in on revenue this year, 40,000.
In other words, and that's what I actually did. I actually, you were showing a budget fiscal year 2020 estimated expenses that totaled out to $222,897. So if I reduce that by 85, the actual cost of your department to the taxpayers and to the budget, I should say, is 137,897. Is that correct, Sean? I know that's a quick of costs that are borne by somebody who's willing to pay for it. I've been a participant in some programs, and unfortunately I've had to take advantage of, and that we do collect so much revenue on it. Needless to say, it is a tough year, and everyone's got to play their part.
For a moment, is this going to be like the Park and Rec where we collect the money in one year and the expenditures are in the next year, so we have an issue? Or is this closer to when it's actually expended in case we have a smaller amount of participants because of the virus and therefore smaller revenue?
We won't know, David, until we roll out these workshops and see. I'm just feel encouraged that once I have 2.5 classes going, then it's going to start paying for itself, and it's going to pay for itself well. So I have no idea. I can't wait I wish I could roll it out tomorrow to see if we can start bringing some revenue into this fiscal year and not even having to wait until July 1st. The minute I get the first one done, it'll go out and we'll see. It's a great investment
But
because
David,
it's not a big.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. Yes,
Sorry.
Sean.
yeah, just to piggyback, I think what you're also asking about the current year, I think they are less dependent on the sort of summer revenue that goes from one fiscal year to the other because
Okay.
they have more steady year round, but there's certainly, there's some impact there, but also I think with a lot of, Joanne's classes, depending on where the enrollment is versus whether they offer the class or not, trying to ensure, it's kind of more tightly controlled to whether they're going to hire the staff to
That's right.
to facilitate the class. So it's a little
Okay.
little more predictable, I suppose, than recreation.
That's
Less
right.
of a wild card and less swings
Correct.
than
Right.
Bucket has because of the nature of the program.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you both. Mayor Orris, I saw your hand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Barwi. And Joanne, thank you for that presentation. On behalf of the entire town council, I think I can say that we are very proud to be supporting the arts. And I'm certainly very proud to suggest that Cheshire is the only community that does it with their town budget. And I'm also happy to support what Mr. Slocum just suggested, which is that it is a great return on investment because it doesn't pay for itself, but it goes a long way to doing it. So from my perspective, we get the best of both worlds in that scenario. So I know you're working really hard. And what I really like to see is people of all ages interacting together in your classes, doing things together. And I think we can never get enough of the interaction of people from, people of the elder ages to the younger ages interacting together. We don't get that enough. This is a place we do get it. We get it at the library. And I'm very supportive of that because we can never forget where we came from. And I think those lessons are passed on in your classes. They're passed on in the school system when we have a Veterans Day where they meet together. They're passed on at the library. And
Yes.
so this is just another place for us to continue to do that. And I am truly supportive of this. Again, we're in a tough year and we're all going to have to do our part with labor to get through this so we don't gut services. I don't want to be continuing to ring that same bell, but I am confident we all know what it's going to take to get there so we can continue doing what we
And,
Thank you.
now, before I hand it back to now
Dave,
Mayor Orris is here to
I
run
think
the
there's a
rest of
couple questions. I think there's a couple questions, Dave. I think I saw a couple hands.
Oh, I missed it. That I was scrolling back and forth. Who?
Dave,
I think we have Don and Jim.
Oh, Don. Okay, sorry, Councilman Walsh. And then Councilman Jim.
Thank you, John, for that presentation. I just had a quick question on, I must credit you for thinking it could be bigger. Is there equipment in the town that we have that you could use? Because I think, it could, I think you're right. It could generate more revenue than just a class that's
It
people come
will.
to. So, but I'm just curious about the equipment that you need, and is that something that is going to need to be an expenditure?
I will have to buy an iPad or two. They're $300 each. But right now, it's difficult to get them till September because so many people are needing them. For the videotaping, no. The professional that I'd like to hire has all his own equipment, so I don't have to worry about a thing. And that's great. So
That's
I'm looking at either $300 or $600 expense because I'll need to provide that iPad for the Zoom calls for the teachers. That contact is important. Just like now, I could be holding up artwork and you could say, do it again. Or you could say, no, that looks great. We need the Zoom calls.
Thank you. Good luck to you on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Councilman Jenks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Barwi. Hi, Joan.
Hi.
So I know this is all brand new as far as the online classes, but what are you sort of anticipating short term, the number of classes, and then what's the sort of capacity in terms of the number of students you can have in each class?
I don't want to have more than 8 students in a class, but so I could be running that same class though. I can run it consecutively. So I can have 3 classes of 8 for the same class. I had some experience. I've taken online classes myself through art, and I understand how well it can work. And I feel that everybody's waiting. Every time I listen to messages at Arts Place phone or I get my emails, it's like people, when are you having these classes ready? I want these classes. So it's what well-known artists have been doing for quite some time.
And these can be sort of all ages in these classes?
The first 5 that I start, what I'm going to roll out as the 90-minute workshops, I want to include every age so that I have them for, grades 1 through 4, and then I have a 5 through 7th grader, and then I have teens and adults, because I want to see where I'm going to get the biggest impact to go ahead with rolling out classes that would last 6 and 7 weeks. So I'm just stepping my foot in the water slowly so that I can have a success. I'm going to want to start with fascinating things that everybody wants to take forever. That's my plan.
Right. So since this is, we're the only town doing this in the state, it sounds like we wouldn't have to go very far to perhaps fill up these classes. Is there a system, and maybe this is a question?
Oh, we're not the only town. Every arts organization will be doing this.
Oh, is
Creative
that,
Arts Workshop, Guilford, we're the only town that we're part of the municipality of the arts. But all the other arts organizations will be moving into this right away because
oh, I see. Okay.
it's what we have to do.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Sorry, let's see. I don't see any other hands. So with that being the last of our budget workshop portion of this meeting tonight, I'll hand it back to the full council chairman to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Borrowy. And I'm assuming we're not going to go back to any public works. I know we left it open for some other budget discussion if necessary, nothing needed.
I did say earlier in the evening that what we're going to do is have a recap of some of the open items that were there from last night next Tuesday.
Okay, great. So now we'll move on to item 5, which is acceptance and appropriation of donations to the Human Services COVID-19 Assistance Program. And with that,
Mr. Chairman, I forgot to send you the memo.
Yeah.
I did advance that to item 1 after the pledge and the roll call, just so we could get directly in the budget.
Okay, great. So the only thing we have left is executive session? Is that correct, Tim?
Yes,
Okay,
that would be
great.
correct, Mr.
So
Chairman.
then I'll
Thank you.
move to 6, which is personnel negotiations, executive session joint with the Board of Education to include all of the members of Board of Education that are interested in attending, Superintendent of Schools, Chief Financial Officer, Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Massiana, Town Manager, Assistant Town Manager, Mr. Jaskat, I believe. Sean, is there anyone I'm missing?
I think you got, yep, I think you got both.
Okay. So with that, I'll call for a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters.
So moved.
Who is that?
Second.
So moved.
Is that Mr. Veliver? I can't see
Yep.
you.
Sorry. Yep.
Yep, Mr. Veliver, is there a second?
Second, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. I appreciate it. Sorry, when we have this many people, you can't see everybody.
Mm.
So with that, we have a second call for a motion to go into executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Sounds like it's unanimous for. So we are going to be going into executive session. I want to thank the presenters tonight for all your hard work. Thank you for everything you do on behalf of the town. And we'll see you soon. And we'll just be adjourning when we come out of it.
Give everybody 30 seconds.